Welcome back to part 2 of the bench build. Not much has happened really since I filmed last night, so what I've got is the beam as I showed it last night, ready to weld at the back. I've got a little pot of water there just in case things go wrong, and I've got another 50 gallons of water outside in a water butt in case things go really wrong. What I have done is cut the front sort of support now for the front of the bench, and I've done the scarf cuts on that as well, so that's ready. Now what I'm thinking with that is, because that's on the front, I've got the option of drilling just 2 clearance holes really at each end and just putting nuts and bolts through, just to fasten the end at the front, which is one less lot of welding, I guess, close to the walls. So I may do that. It's going to be welded at the inner legs anyway, and it's going to be supported well at the inner legs as well. So you know, a decent size sort of M8 nut and bolt through each end at the front might be, well, it'd be more than sufficient, I think, for the load that's going to be on it. So it just reduces the risk. It's one less lot of welding next to the wall, so I may go for that, or depending how the welding goes at the back, if it's okay and it's not making too much mess, I'll just weld the whole thing. So that's the plan for today. So I'll do a bit of time lapse as I do that, and if I set fire to the garage, you'll be able to watch that in fast motion. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Well, it looks worse than it is, I think. Bit of cosmetic damage, but it'll be okay. Just give that a quick rub down and a bit of paint back over it, and it'll be fine. Once it's dried out, I'll have to chuck some water on it just to put the fire out. And I've also done the other end the same. So that back beam's now fully welded on in position, both ends. I'm still making my mind up whether I just weld the front beam on, and while I've got the paint out, you know, for how long it's going to take, just to give the wall a quick rub once it's dry and chuck some paint over it. It's not going to take that long, so I might just weld the front end on as well, so it's all welded. So I'll keep bringing you back, keep doing little clips, probably time lapse stuff if I can. I've just realised when I welded that second end, I'd not spun the camera around, so I'll just cut that bit out. You didn't see that, but it's the same as the first end, no different. So I'll keep bringing you back as we go through the build, and hopefully we'll be getting somewhere near later on today. I've roughly clamped the front top piece in place at both ends, so I've got a G clamp on both ends there. Sorry for the handheld, I'll try and do this and not make you too dizzy. I was just going to show you the scarf joint. So there's the scarf joint, and I've left about, it's not going to focus that close in, there's not enough light, so I've left about a millimetre gap here for some filler, and there's probably about a 2 millimetre gap down that side, so I think I'm just going to weld that. That's going to make a neater joint than doing it with the other method I said about drilling clearance holes and bolting it. And the same at that end. Look, you can see there's about a millimetre gap there on the scarf, and then there's probably a 2 or 3 mil gap there, so that will take a bit more weld. So I'll fill my little water pot back up, and we'll get that welded, and then that's the difficult bit done at that point really. That's the bit that's going to be causing bother with burning the walls. The rest of it, the idea here is, obviously there's going to be 2 legs going down to the floor, front and back, supporting the centre of the span on both sides, front and back. And then you'll see there's a gap at the back between the back brace and the wall, and that's been driven by these pillars in the corner. So the original design I'd done was to actually put the four legs into that secondary corner, if you like. So the four legs were going to go in this corner here, and I was going to put a couple of outriggers going sort of from it to the wall to support the timber. But I prefer this method. So this is wall to wall now across, you can see, so it's all the way across. And then what I'm going to do at the back, where the sockets are, is there's a batten behind the wall where each of those sockets are. So I'm going to make up two angle iron braces that will go back to the wall and drop down, and I can bolt those then quite rigidly into the batten that sits behind the wall here, and that will just give the centre of the bench a lot more rigidity that way. Yeah, a lot of it's been make it up as you go along kind of thing really, even though I'd done some CAD drawings for the rough lengths and sizes I needed. The good news is I've done a bit of a measure and I've just got the height right so that my roll cab will fit under the centrepiece, and there's about 3 or 4 millimetres to spare clearance. So it's quite a high bench this. It's going to be standing at about 1 metre high. So as benches go, that's quite high. It's probably a good 150 mil higher than a bench that you'd buy commercially, but I'm fine with that, even though I'm not the tallest of people. A nice high workbench for me is better anyway, because you're working at head height then, you know, if you're working on a drill, or I've got plans of putting a surface plate on the bench as well, so everything's at a decent height to work with. You're not bent over, stooped over looking at stuff, so it just, you know, the two things go together, that I can get the roll cab underneath. It increases the amount of storage capacity that I'm going to have on the lower shelves at each side as well, to put things like, you know, the welding units and whatever else will go on there. So apologies for the handheld. We'll get you put back up on the tripod. I'll fire the welder back up and we'll time lapse the two weld joints at each end, and the subsequent fire and putting out of the fire. So you know how I said I wasn't a welder, schoolboy error. Maybe I should have just tacked the ends before I got really stuck into them and welded them. I've actually managed to weld my clamp to the bench. So I said I'd show the good bits and the bad bits, and that's kind of a bad bit. So I'll just see if I can extract the clamp from the bench without too much damage. Oh dear. Oh well, never mind. It's done the job. The bench isn't going anywhere, that's the main thing. I thought I'd give you a laugh. Now then, the next question is, have I done the same thing at this end? We'll do that live. Perfect. Well, there we go. That's the bulk of the hard work done anyway, in terms of the dangerous bits. When I mean dangerous, I'm just on about the damage limitation of burning the garage to bits. So I'll crack on now with the rest. Start putting in the legs and the bottom shelves, and I'll probably stick that on some more time lapse as I go. guys, quick update. It's all much of the same, so I'm not leaving the camera running because it's taking quite a while, and I'm off camera quite a lot, cutting and angle grinding the scarf joints out and whatnot. But you can see there I've got I'm starting to get the bottom braces in now. So that side's done. I've got the two top braces in there. I've got the bottom brace to put in on the middle leg there, and the bottom brace is in on that side. Well, that was part of the original frame, I guess. So that's where we are. I've got one more bottom brace to put in there, and then I've got 4 more bits to cut to do the sort of lower long bits, if you want to call them that, across the bottoms there. So we're getting there. It's not easy crawling around on the concrete floor, but we're making headway with it, and every time I weld a new bit on, the whole thing's getting more and more solid, and it's going to be an incredibly solid bench when it's done, which is what I was after, and that's why I used angle iron rather than timber. So I'll bring you back when I've got the next few bits cut, and I might do a bit more time lapse on the welding, but it's more of the same of what you've already seen. So I'll bring you back when we're either doing it or when we've got to the end of the welding. Right, well, I've got the last 4 lengths cut and got the scarf joints done on them. That's all boring stuff, so I didn't film it. It's just cutting in the bandsaw, and then lots of angle grinding using cutting discs and grinders to get the scarf joints where they need to be to clear the other welds and the other angle iron. So that's all done, and we're ready to weld the final 4 bits on at the bottom. What I did do last night, just briefly, and again this morning, is a coat of white paint where I'd set fire to the wall. So that's all looking good again. Just gave it a quick rub down with some sandpaper and then a couple of coats of white, and it looks fine. So there might be a bit of burning here again, probably not as much. I'll try and keep the welds away from the wall unit. These are only for sort of shelves at the bottom. They're not taking a huge amount of weight, so I can. There's plenty of edges to weld, and I'll just avoid the ones that are touching the wall if I can. So I'll put a time lapse on now as I finish off welding the remaining bits. Well guys, I'm just going handheld quickly. That concludes the butchery, otherwise known as welding. So we've got to a reasonable state now. We've got all the shelf sort of supports in at the bottom, and if I just walk you to the spirit level, let's have a look. It's not going to focus particularly well. On focus, but you can probably just see that this is down to the light that we've got in the shop. It's not the best, but that's sort of bang in the middle, and the other way, is that going to show? It's not showing up very well, that, unfortunately, because of the light, but again it's bob on in the middle. So for somebody who's not a welder and not a fabricator, and bearing in mind I'm working with a 40-year-old welding set with a handheld mask, so I've only, you know, it's one-handed welding pretty much because you're holding the mask the rest of the time. I think that'll pass as not bad. I'm sure it's pretty ugly in places, but like I said before, functional. I've stood on all of those beams, every single one of them, so they've all been well load tested, and yeah, it's absolutely solid. And again, I come back to the bench itself, giving it a really good pull. It's just not moving anywhere. So I was going to put some stringers to the back and bolt them to the wall, but that's just not necessary. It's really not going to go anywhere. And by the time I've put the wooden shelf on the top, which probably weighs something in the order of, I don't know, it must be 40 kilograms, I would think, ish. And then there's going to be extra weight on the bottom on the shelves, you know, with whatever I store down there as well. That, you know, that's just absolutely solid, which is what I wanted. It's not going to go anywhere. I've got a bit of cosmetic work to do. We've had a bit of burning going on again, just at that corner, and the same thing at that corner. So I'll just leave that. I've got to clean all these welds up yet anyway, but I'll leave that to all cool down a bit now, and then we'll have a tidy up and a bit of a paint, and then I'll have a sweep up. And what I really want to try is to see whether I got all my maths right, and to see whether the roll cab will fit in that space in the middle. So I'll do that live on camera, and if I got it wrong, you can all have a good laugh at my expense. So you can see I'm not cheating, guys. There's a roll cab with various mess all over the top of it. I've been using it as a bit of a workbench while I've been welding. Just out of interest, before I pack all of that away to test the fit of the roll cab under the bench, I'll just show you the other sort of disabling factor to my welding. It's not as though I was even using decent quality welding rods. These are Powercraft, which I'm sure will raise a smile or two with anybody who's a welder. I think I got them out of Aldi's or somewhere like that. So, you know, not only are they 10 years old and damp, but they're also pretty useless, I would imagine, in terms of quality. But again, they've done the job. They've stuck it together for what I want. You know, none of it's on show. It's just functionality, really, and it's done that. It's a bit ugly in places, but it's done the job. So I'm going to get the top of that tidied off now, and then I'll spin the camera around and we'll do it live and just see if the roll cab fits underneath. Right, here we go then, guys. I promise this hasn't been test fitted. This is live. This is where I'm either going to be incredibly frustrated or happy. Let's see how we get on. Well, that's a good start. Perfect. So the plan there was for that to sit underneath, and it does sit underneath. There's about, I don't know, what's that, half-inch of clearance or something like that. So spot on. What I've also done is I've obviously made it wide enough so I can just chuck the roll cab in that way round, and I can still access all the drawers. But I'm thinking future-proofing here. If, and the situation may arise where I need, or you know, I need to get myself a second roll cab, I shall go for another one of these just because of how good quality they are. And I've made that gap as wide as I've made it deliberately, so that hopefully, plan B, and the whole depth of the bench has been made to the back wall. So the idea there being I can stick two of these things side by side under there if I need to. You know, at the moment I don't have enough tooling to warrant that, but the option's there if I need it, and that was why I built it that bit wider. And I know that sacrificed a bit of space on each side, but that was the plan. So that's going to work if I need it to. And the other idea was, you know, I can roll this thing out when I'm working in the shop, and if I need to do anything a bit more focused on the bench, sort of, you know, electrical work, polishing, handwork, whatever it is, I'm going to get myself a decent high chair with a gas strut on it. And because I've got this space here now, I can sit, you know, quite happily at the bench with my knees underneath, working more focused at the bench with power. So that was all of the thinking that went into the design and the shape of the thing. But you know, I think we'll call that a success. That is properly rigid. So on with the woodwork. I'll not do too much filming of that because I'm going to be in and out with the wood, and it's a two-man job. So what I'll do is basically the idea is it's an 8-foot sheet by 4 foot. Obviously 4 foot's far too wide front to back. I've just about got 8 foot between this pillar and that pillar, so that the main body of the timber is going to slide in between those two sections, and I might need to do a bit of trimming to get it to fit. And then the spare wood that comes off the front, I'm going to chop off to bring it back to the front of the bench size. I'll have enough spare wood there to make 2 end pieces, one to go in that end and one to go in the other end, to fill the gaps that are left. So that's the thinking about how to use that sheet. And then timber for the bottom shelves I've still to purchase, and I don't think I'm going to go for marine ply. You know, it's pretty expensive, and I wanted that for the top. I wanted something solid that was going to, you know, not warp and twist and buckle and damp or whatever. The bottom shelves, yeah, I don't know what I'm not going to use MDF because I don't like that stuff. But I might even just buy some 6 by 1, something like that, timber, and I might just put a series of planks in basically across each side, just to use as a shelf for storage. And then the final plan, the bottom underneath the bench, I've left that deliberately high. 2 reasons. One, to try and create more stability in the framework by having a brace that was, you know, further up than at the floor. And then secondly, the plan for underneath that section, I'm going to either buy, purchase, or even make, as a worst case, some boxes that will go underneath those 2 shelves, and I'm going to plan on using that for my sort of bar ends and steel stock and whatever else, you know, that sort of thing, so that I can slide them away under the bench out the way, but then I can just pull them out, get the bar stock, and that, you know, it's all about trying to maximise the space as much as possible. You know, this is a big bench unit, and to not make use of all of that space would be foolish in a small single garage. So that's the plan. Okay, I'm going to crack on now with the woodwork, and I'll either bring you back partially way through it, or when I've completed it, to see the sort of finished bench. Well guys, happy days. I've now got a bench finally. Bit more work to do. It's, for whatever reason, the steelwork at the back it's bowed up slightly, so it's slightly high at the back, to the back to front. It's level across the way, but the back 2 supports have kind of lifted off the ground by about, I don't know, 5 millimetres, something like that. So it's bowed, and I would imagine it's bowed when I did the welding at the bottom. So I can move it myself, and I think when I get some weight on these bottom shelves at the bottom, it's going to pull it all back down anyway. So I'm not, at the moment, I'm not going to do any surgery on the steelwork. So it's that was a heavy piece of wood. I think it said 60 kilograms, I think, on the label, so it took some manhandling, and it's hardwood ply as well, marine ply, so it took some cutting. There was no way I was going to cut that with a saw, so I used the router, which I think I did a bit of time lapse of that, so hopefully you'll see that getting cut. What I did do was just stuck the pillar drill up just briefly, just to see what the operating height's like, and to be honest, it's spot on. You know, it's just at the right height. If I was using a floor mounted pillar drill, this would be about the height of the handles on it. So yeah, happy with that. Happy with the height. Happy that the roll tab fits underneath. I've just got the two end pieces of wood now to do at each end, where the pillars are, which will be a bit easier, a bit smaller. And then I need to decide what I'm doing with the timber itself, because obviously I'm going to be drilling, grinding. You know, there's going to be oily things up on the bench top. This marine ply will be fine with oil on it. It won't do it any harm at all. It's just cosmetically it will start to look a bit messy. So I'm really at this point unsure whether to give it a bit of a sand down, which it needs anyway to get the sharp bits off, the nasties off. But then I didn't know whether to just give the top surface and the front face a coat of yacht varnish or something like that, just to give it a protective covering really, so that if there is any oil splashes and things like that, it's not going to be soaking into the wood. Not that it would do it any harm at all, but it's just purely cosmetic. So that's been a lot of work over the last 2 or 3 days, certainly for me. That's why I'm really pleased with that. I'm really pleased with that, and it's now starting to look like a proper workshop. So we're nearly there. We're nearly there. A bit more work to do. I'm going to crack on and get the end bits done, give it a good sanding, and I think that will probably be the end of the episode of the making of the bench. I know I've got some more timbers to cut for the bottom shelves, which I'll do. You know, there's nothing fantastic about that. I think I'm just going to use 6x1 planks and just plank it in either side. So there's nothing, you know, you'll not miss anything. I'll bring, you know, you'll obviously see it when it's done, when it's finished anyway. So yeah, fantastic, happy days. So thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I'll catch you all on the next video.